The courthouse buzzed with its usual cold rhythm, shuffling papers, measured footsteps, and voices flattened by formality. Outside, a sleek black car rolled to a stop. The door opened, and a man stepped out, straightening his jacket with muscle. Memory more than vanity. Nathaniel Grant didn't believe in wasting time, not in boardrooms, not in traffic, and certainly not in court. He was here for one thing: to finalize a multi-million-dollar property acquisition, a deal his company had chased for over a year. He walked through the metal detectors, with a nod to the guards who recognized him not from familiarity, but from the way people recognize someone powerful. His suit was crisp, the kind that whispered wealth rather than screamed it. His leather shoes barely made a sound on the polished floor. He was used to this world, where every second was currency and every glance a negotiation. What he wasn't used to was pausing. And yet, just as he passed the central atrium, something strange pulled at him. A subtle shift in the air, like hearing your name in a crowd. To his right, near the wall lined with wooden benches, 4 small figures sat huddled together. They didn't belong there. Not in this place, where ambition dripped off the walls. They were children for little girls. None of them older than 7. Their clothes were clean but faded, their shoes mismatched. They sat with their hands folded neatly in their laps, backs straight, legs dangling because they were too short for their feet to reach the ground. He told himself to keep walking. His assistant had already texted twice. The hearing room was just down the hall, but something about them, maybe it was their stillness, or how they weren't playing or talking, made him slow down. He approached cautiously, like someone nearing a flock of birds that might scatter. "Are you all right?" he asked softly. One of the girls looked up, a quiet, wide-eyed gaze meeting his. Her hair was the color of sand and clumsily braided. She blinked but didn't answer. A second girl, slightly older, spoke instead. "We're waiting for Mama. She's inside." Nathaniel glanced toward the courtroom door just behind them. Family court. His stomach tightened. "And she left you here alone. She said we had to be quiet, not talk to anyone," the girl said quickly, then added, "She's coming back." It hit him then, not just how small they were, but how practiced. Like they'd done this before. Like they knew the rules of being forgotten. He crouched a little. "Do you know how long you've been sitting here?" "Since morning," said the smallest one. "But it's okay." He looked at the hallway clock. It was just after 11. "Have you had breakfast?" There was a pause. The girls looked at one another. The same one who had first looked up finally whispered, "We're hungry." He didn't expect it to hit like it did. Those 2 words, so simple, stopped something inside him. The way she said them, it wasn't a complaint. It wasn't even a request. It was fact, matter of fact, and apologetic all at once. She didn't say it to provoke sympathy. She said it like a child who knew better than to expect kindness. Nathaniel stood up abruptly. His heart thumped harder than he liked. He looked around. No one seemed to notice. No one seemed to care. He walked over to the security guard at the front. "Those children," he said, pointing back. "They're alone." The guard barely looked up. "Yeah, their mom's in there. Theft case. Public defenders with her. And they've been sitting there since morning." "Probably," the guard said, uninterested. "Not our job." Nathaniel didn't argue. He didn't say anything at all. He turned on his heel and walked straight out of the courthouse. 15 minutes later, he came back with 2 bags from the nearest cafe, bottled water, sandwiches, fruit, and 4 warm pastries. He approached the girls again, this time sitting on the bench beside them. "I know I'm not your dad or your uncle or anyone," he said, "but it's not right for kids to be hungry. So, if it's okay with you, I brought something." He didn't hand it to them directly. He placed the bags beside them and opened one slowly so they could see. He watched their eyes grow wide, not in surprise, but in hesitation, as if this were a test. Then, one of the older girls reached out and took a sandwich with both hands. She didn't say thank you. She didn't smile. She just started to eat, carefully, like she didn't want to waste a single crumb. The others followed, silently, except for one who whispered to the others, "Share the juice." Nathaniel didn't move. He just sat there, trying to swallow. A sudden lump in his throat. He'd made billions in tech and real estate, negotiated with presidents and prime ministers, but in that moment, none of it mattered, because no deal, no stock price, no speech had ever made his chest ache the way it did. Now watching 4 little girls eat like it was the only meal they'd had in days, he checked his watch. The court hearing he came for had already started, but he didn't get up. For once, time could wait. Something else needed him more, and deep down, he knew this wasn't going to be a one-time encounter. These girls hadn't just interrupted his day. They had changed it, and they didn't even know his name. Asterisk. The hallway began to blur behind him, as Nathaniel sat in silence, watching the girls eat slowly, each bite measured as if they feared it would disappear. The smallest one paused halfway, through her sandwich, tearing off a corner and quietly offering it to the sister next to her, even though they each had their own. That act, small but selfless, lodged something deeper in Nathaniel's chest. He had built his empire on precision and profit, yet these girls, who had nothing, gave without hesitation. He didn't ask questions right away. Something told him not to. Instead, he just stayed close, ready in case anyone tried to move them. along or ask why a CEO in a custom-tailored suit was sitting on a courthouse bench next to children in faded dresses. Eventually, the courtroom door creaked open. A woman stepped out, frail, thin, her shoulders hunched as though she had forgotten what it felt like to walk with pride. Her hair was tied back in a rushed, loose bun, and her face was tired in a way that couldn't be fixed with sleep. She saw the girls, saw Nathaniel, and stopped in her tracks. The oldest girl whispered, "Mama," and ran to her. The woman instinctively knelt, gathering her in her arms. The other girls followed, clinging to her like gravity. But her eyes never left Nathaniel. He stood slowly, offering no judgment in his face. "I'm sorry," the woman said quickly, defensive and embarrassed. "They weren't supposed to talk to anyone. I didn't have anyone to leave them with." "I'm not here to judge you," Nathaniel said calmly. They were quiet, very respectful, just hungry. She lowered her gaze, shame crawling across her face. "I didn't think it would take this long. They're good girls. I told them to wait." "You did the best you could," he replied, and for once, he meant it with every part of him. She hesitated. "I don't want trouble. I'm not here to cause any." Silence stretched between them, but it wasn't hostile. It was thick with things neither of them had said yet. Nathaniel finally asked, "What happens now?" The woman stood upright, clutching her purse tightly. "They set another date. I couldn't pay the fine. It'll go to trial. They said maybe I could get a reduced sentence, but," she trailed off, "I can't go to jail. They have no one else. Where's their father?" She shook her head slowly. "Gone. Years ago. I work nights when I can. Clean offices mostly, but it's not steady. And sometimes I have to bring the girls with me, leave them in the hallway or in the car." Her voice cracked, but didn't break. "I do what I can." Nathaniel didn't say anything for a moment. He looked at the girls again, now gathered around their mother like they'd found the only warmth in a cold world. Their clothes, their shoes, their eyes, it all painted a life he hadn't seen in years, maybe never. A life lived quietly, invisibly, on the edge of collapse. He handed her one of the bottled waters. "You need to stay hydrated," he said. Gently. She took it slowly, confused by the kindness. "I don't want charity," she murmured, almost reflexively. "This isn't charity," he replied. "This is humanity." She looked at him, really looked now. "Why are you helping us?" Nathaniel almost smiled. "Honestly, I don't know. I came here for a business matter. Important deal. But your daughters stopped me with 2 words. We're hungry." Those words repeated in his head like a bell that wouldn't stop ringing. They had cracked something in him, something old and buried. Maybe it was the boy he used to be, the one who'd once lived in a 1-bedroom apartment with a single mother, who skipped meals to feed him. He hadn't thought of that version of himself in a long time. "I'm Nathaniel," he said quietly, "and I'd like to help, not just with lunch." The woman hesitated. "I'm Claire." She extended her hand, rough from labor. He shook it gently. "I can't promise miracles," he said, "but I can promise this won't be the last time we talk." Just then, a court officer called out Nathaniel's name, reminding him of the purpose he'd originally come for. But that moment felt irrelevant now. He looked at Claire. "Do you have transportation?" "No," she admitted. "We took the bus. But it's another hour till the next one. Wait here." He left without explanation. This time, it wasn't the usual brisk CEO walk. It was slower, thoughtful. 20 minutes later, a black SUV pulled up in front of the courthouse. His driver stepped out, confused but obedient, holding open the back doors. Claire stared at the car, stunned. "We can't ride in that." "Why not?" Nathaniel asked. "It has 4 seats. That's exactly how many you need." "But Claire," he said softly, "it's just a ride." She didn't argue again. The girls piled in carefully, looking around at the plush seats like they'd stepped into another world. One of them whispered, "It smells like flowers." Nathaniel watched them drive off before turning back toward the courthouse. But he didn't go to the hearing room. He pulled out his phone and called his assistant. "Cancel everything this afternoon," he said. "I need to look into a family situation." "You want me to reschedule the merger closing?" "Yes." There was a pause. On the other end, "Understood." He hung up and stood there in the sunlight, the wind brushing against his collar. For the first time in a long time, Nathaniel Grant didn't feel like a man chasing profit. He felt like a man finally being reminded why he ever wanted to succeed in the first place. And somewhere in that luxury SUV, driving away, 4 little girls were giggling together over the warmth of a car seat hand, the rare magic of being noticed. Rain fell softly that night, tapping against Nathaniel's office window like a quiet reminder that the world beyond spreadsheets and contracts still existed. He stood in the dim glow of the city skyline, one hand in his pocket, the other holding the edge of a photo frame on his desk. It was dusty, he hadn't touched it in years. Inside it was a photo of him as a child, no older than the girls he'd met earlier, sitting on a rickety couch next to his mother, both of them smiling like they hadn't just skipped dinner again. He had tried to forget that chapter. Now he couldn't stop remembering it. Nathaniel rarely let anything interfere with business, but after that morning, something shifted. The hunger in the girl's eyes, Claire's quiet strength, their invisible life, hiding in plain sight. It followed him through the rest of the day, haunting his silence, interrupting every meeting. He finally gave in to the urge around midnight. He called in a favor. By noon the next day, he had a file on Claire, nothing invasive, just enough to understand. She'd been arrested twice before, once for shoplifting baby formula, once for unpaid parking violations that turned into a warrant. Both charges dismissed. Both times, she had no one to call. She worked janitorial contracts for 3 different companies, none of which offered health insurance or stable hours. Her address was a shelter rotation program. She and the girls had been living between temporary housing and a women's safe center. No permanent home, no reliable food source, and no extended family. He read every page in silence, then closed the file slowly. This wasn't about pity. It was about injustice wrapped in bureaucracy. He couldn't explain why it mattered to him so much. He just knew it did. That same afternoon, he told his assistant to reschedule his weekend trip. Then he called Claire. She hesitated when she picked up. "Hello, it's Nathaniel. I didn't expect you to call. I told you I would." He could hear the background noise, children laughing faintly, a TV playing somewhere far away. He imagined the shelter, the girls probably curled up on a mattress on the floor. The weight of it pressed on him like gravity. "I'd like to take you and the girls somewhere," he said. "For what? Lunch? And maybe something else." There was silence, long enough to make him think she'd hung up. Then she said, "All right." He sent a car when she and the girls stepped out of it. She had tried to make them all look neat. Their clothes were still secondhand, but clean, their hair combed and tied. Claire herself wore the same old shoes but stood straighter this time, unsure but willing. He took them to a quiet little restaurant tucked away in a historic part of town, where the tables were carved wood and the music soft and calming. The girls were overwhelmed at first, careful not to touch the glasses, looking to Claire for permission before speaking. But slowly, with each passing moment, they relaxed. By dessert, they were giggling. Nathaniel didn't talk business. He didn't lecture. He just listened. Claire eventually opened up. "I used to study nursing," she said, tracing the rim of her glass. "Dropped out when I got pregnant. Never could afford to go back. Why not try again?" She gave him a tired smile. "I'm 35, Mr. Grant. My youngest just turned 4. I can barely afford school supplies, let alone tuition. What if you didn't have to worry about those things?" She blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean," he said gently, "what if someone gave you the chance to build again? A real shot, not a handout. An opportunity." "I've had opportunities," she said. "They come with strings. Not this one." He saw the fear in her eyes because hope, when you've been broken, is more terrifying than failure. But it was also the first time he'd seen her look like someone imagining a future. He reached into his coat and slid an envelope across the table. "This is a small start, enough to cover stable housing for the next 6 months. I already spoke with a landlord who's willing to lease to you without the usual background checks. I'll cover the deposit." Claire stared at it like it was on fire. "Why are you doing this?" He paused, searching for the right words. "Because someone once helped my mother. When I was your daughter's age, we were one step away from being homeless. One woman a teacher took the time to notice. That changed everything." She opened the envelope slowly. When she saw the documents inside, proof of housing, a prepaid card, contact numbers for support, her hands trembled. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You don't have to say anything." The girls didn't understand the details, but they could sense the shift. One of them leaned toward Nathaniel and asked, "Does this mean we get to stay in one place now?" He smiled at her. "Yes, it means you get your own beds." The girls' eyes lit up like she'd just been promised the moon. Later that evening, Nathaniel watched as they moved into the modest 2-bedroom apartment on the edge of town. It wasn't luxury, but it was safe, warm. Their own. The girls danced across the carpet like it was a castle. Claire stood in the doorway, tears quietly running down her cheeks, saying nothing. Nathaniel turned to go, but she stopped him. "Thank you," she said, voice shaking, "for seeing us." He paused at the door and replied softly, "Thank you, for reminding me what matters." And in that moment, something unfamiliar bloomed in his chest. Not pity, not pride. Purpose. Asterisk. It was just after sunrise when Nathaniel parked across the street from the modest apartment complex. The windows on the second floor were still dark. The world was quiet, too early for traffic, too early for calls, too early for the noise of profit and projections. Yet he found himself sitting there, engine off, coffee untouched, simply watching. He didn't know why he was drawn back. His schedule was packed. Meetings, investors, clients, but none of it felt urgent anymore. The merger that once consumed his attention now felt hollow compared to the memory of 4 little girls twirling across worn carpet in joy. Because they had a door to close at night, his phone buzzed with a reminder. He silenced it. Then, like a slow sunrise, a small light flickered on in the apartment window. A few minutes later, he saw Claire pull back the curtain, stretch slightly, and walk toward what looked like a small kitchenette. Moments after, the shadows of the girls emerged behind her, sleepy, hair tousled, feet dragging. One by one, they appeared around a table that barely fit them, and Claire served toast. He could almost hear their laughter from where he sat. It was nothing extravagant, but it was theirs. That afternoon, he did something he hadn't done in years. He visited the part of the city he had grown up in. The streets looked smaller now, the paint peeled from houses he used to run past. The grocery store was still there, though under a new name. The old diner, where his mother once worked the breakfast shift and let him sit in the corner with schoolbooks, was gone. A parking lot stood in its place. He found himself standing outside the crumbling building where they'd lived a walk-up, with broken steps and rusted railings. He could almost hear his mother's voice calling him in before dark. It hurt, in a way he hadn't expected, not because he missed it but because he had buried it. His success had been fueled by a refusal to ever go back, but now he saw it differently. It wasn't the poverty he remembered, it was the fight, the quiet strength, the small acts of love that made survival possible. That night, he called Claire again. "I want to show you something tomorrow," he said. "If you're free." "What kind of something?" she asked cautiously. "A place, something I think you'll understand." The next morning, he picked her up personally. The girls were at school thanks to Claire's new job, orientation schedule, and she sat quietly in the passenger seat, unsure what to say. He drove her across town, to a gated lot with a faded sign. St. Miriam's Community Center. "What is this place?" "It was supposed to be torn down years ago, but the land's still owned by the city. I've been considering something for a while now. I just didn't know what to do with it until I met you." He unlocked the front doors with a key the city manager had given him weeks ago, just in case he changed his mind. Inside, the center was dusty and abandoned. Cracked tiles, torn posters of old youth programs, graffiti scrawled on walls, but beneath the neglect was potential. Claire stepped cautiously over a fallen sign that read, "Free meals every Thursday." "You used to come here?" she asked. He nodded. They had a program. After-school help, food, a safe place to wait until my mom finished work. I didn't realize how much it meant at the time. Claire looked around, and something shifted in her expression. "It could be something again," she whispered. "Something real." "That's what I was thinking," he said. "I want to rebuild it properly, not as a charity but as a partnership." She turned sharply. "What do you mean?" "I don't want to run it. I want someone who understands the need. Someone who's lived it. Someone like you." Claire took a step back. "I'm not qualified. You're more qualified than anyone I know. You've lived the very reasons this place needs to exist." She stared at him, stunned. "I can hire people to manage logistics, but I want you to be the heart of it. Design the programs, hire the staff, lead the direction. Be the voice for families like yours." Her hands trembled. "Why are you doing all this?" "Because I was given a second chance once," he said, softly, "and maybe I forgot what to do with it. But meeting you, and the girls it reminded me." Claire walked slowly through the main hall, brushing her fingers against an old mural of children holding hands beneath a rainbow dot, and then she turned. "Okay, but I won't just take handouts. I'll work for it. I want to earn every part of this." He smiled. "That's exactly why you're the right person." Over the next few weeks, the dust began to clear. Walls were patched. Painters came in. Architects reviewed the structure. Nathaniel used his connections not for profit this time, but for purpose. Claire was there every morning, clipboard in hand, listening, learning, directing, and every afternoon. The four little girls would come after school, sitting on crates, watching their mother transform a forgotten building into a place of hope. One afternoon, the youngest girl turned to Nathaniel and said shyly, "Is this our center now?" He knelt down beside her. "No," he said gently. "It's for everyone, but it started because of you." She tilted her head. "Because we were hungry." He nodded. "Yes, and because someone finally listened." Outside, the new sign was going up. The Haven, a place to begin again, and for the first time in his adult life, Nathaniel Grant didn't feel like he was building a legacy, he felt like he was healing. The grand opening of the Haven was still 3 weeks away, but the building already pulsed with new life. Painters were finishing the murals. Volunteers were assembling shelves, filling them with donated books, art supplies, and school uniforms. The scent of fresh wood and lavender cleaning solution hung in the air, mixing strangely with the laughter of children who had already begun to treat the place like home. But Nathaniel stood in the center of it all, quiet, watching, listening, remembering. He wasn't used to this kind of noise, children running down halls, teenagers helping to stock food pantries, single mothers exchanging recipes in the soon-to-be community kitchen. It wasn't corporate. It wasn't polished. And that was what made it beautiful. Claire had taken to a role with a kind of strength that surprised everyone except Nathaniel. She moved through the center with authority now, clipboard in hand, a soft voice full of fire. Her decisions weren't always perfect, but they were rooted in experience. She didn't just know what the families needed, she was one of them. He'd never seen leadership look like that. Quiet, grounded, brave. That afternoon, while walking through the activity room, he saw her bent over a table, helping 2 kids assemble a puzzle. One of them had lost a shoe, the other had smudged paint on his cheek. She was smiling, calm as ever, gently teaching them to take turns. He leaned against the doorframe and just watched, and in that moment, he saw something he hadn't let himself admit until now. She wasn't just changing lives, she was changing his. That night, He couldn't sleep, not because of stress or deadlines, but because for the first time, his life felt uncertain in a way that wasn't built on control. The walls he'd built over decades, walls of logic, power, wealth, were starting to crack, and behind them was something softer, riskier, real. He paced his living room, then pulled out an old leather notebook he hadn't touched in years. Inside were quotes, thoughts, half-finished, ideas scribbled from back when he still believed business could be a tool for good, not just a machine for profit. He flipped to a clean page and wrote, "What if we measured value by lives impacted, not dollars gained?" He stared at the sentence for a long time, then underlined it. The next morning, he arrived at the Haven earlier than usual. The lights were still off, but Claire was already there, sipping tea by the front window. She looked up in surprise when he walked in. "You're early," she said. "So are you." "Couldn't sleep," she admitted. He nodded. "Same." They stood in silence for a moment, the kind of silence that holds everything unspoken. "I've been thinking," he finally said. "I want to expand this." Claire raised an eyebrow. "Already? This is more than just a building. It's proof that people still care, that second chances matter. I want to bring this to other neighborhoods, other cities. We create a model that can be replicated." She blinked, caught between excitement and disbelief. "Nathaniel, that's huge." "I know," he said, "and I want you to lead it." She shook her head slowly. "I'm still learning, so am I," he said. "But you've got something I don't." "What's that?" "Courage that doesn't need to prove itself." Claire looked away for a moment, then smiled quietly. "If we do this, we do it together." He held out his hand. "Deal." And just like that, a new chapter began. Over the next few weeks, they worked side by side, not boss and employee, not rescuer and rescued, but equals, partners. But Haven became more than just a community center, but became a symbol. Journalists started calling, foundations wanted to fund more sites, families from across the city began signing up for programs, former shelter moms applied to volunteer, their kids drawing pictures for the Haven's bulletin board with crayon rainbows and words like "Thank you, Miss Claire." But none of it felt flashy. It felt real. One afternoon, Nathaniel brought the girls new backpacks. When he handed them over, the oldest looked up at him and said, "You're not scary anymore." He laughed. "Was I scary before?" She nodded seriously. "You didn't smile much." "Well," he said, kneeling down to her level, "you helped me fix that." She grinned and ran off. Later that night, Claire found him in his office, sitting alone in the quiet. "You've changed," she said softly. He looked up. "I don't know if I changed. I think I just remembered who I used to be." Claire walked over and placed a single photo on his desk. It was a candid him, laughing with the girls during a painting activity, his shirt covered in fingerprints, his expression lit with a kind of joy he hadn't seen in himself for years. "I'm glad you did," she whispered. He looked at the photo, then at her. "I don't know where this leads," he said, "but I don't want to lose it." "You won't," she replied, "if you keep choosing it." And for the first time in his life, Nathaniel Grant, the man who used to measure his success by the length of his portfolio, felt that maybe, just maybe, he was finally rich in the ways that truly mattered. The ceremony was supposed to be small, just a quiet acknowledgement of the center's first anniversary. But by the time the sun began to dip low in the sky, the front lawn of the Haven was overflowing with people. Families, volunteers, city officials, even former skeptics who had once doubted a project like this could survive in a world so hardened by indifference. Colorful streamers fluttered in the wind. Tables were lined with homemade food from the community. Children ran barefoot through the grass, their laughter mingling with soft music from a local quartet. But amidst the noise and joy, Nathaniel stood off to the side, watching it all unfold like a dream he still wasn't sure he deserved. He had spoken at hundreds of events in his lifetime, product launches, board meetings, international summits, but as he stood behind the microphone that day, looking at the crowd that had come not because they had to but because they believed, his hands trembled for the first time in years. Claire stood beside him. Her smile was steady, grounding. "You ready?" she whispered. "I'm not sure I ever will be," he replied, then stepped forward. He cleared his throat. "I used to think success was about numbers," he began, his voice measured. "About how much you own, how far you can go, how fast you can rise. I spent my life chasing those things, and I got them. Every single one." A hush fell over the crowd. "But then one day, I walked into a courthouse to close a deal, and I met for little girls who hadn't eaten, and suddenly, none of it mattered. Not the suit I wore, not the car I drove, not even the billion-dollar merger waiting on my desk. All I could think was, what kind of world lets children go hungry while people like me walk past without blinking?" He paused, his voice thickening. "I'm not here today as a CEO. I'm here because I was reminded by a quiet mother, by 4 brave girls, and by all of you that healing doesn't come from headlines or handouts. It comes from choosing to care, again and again, even when it's not convenient." The crowd was silent, moved. He stepped back, and Claire gently squeezed his hand before walking up to speak. "I used to think people like him didn't see people like me," she said, her voice calm, unwavering. "But I was wrong. Sometimes they just forget, and sometimes They need to be reminded in ways they can't ignore. She looked over at Nathaniel. This place didn't start with money. It started with listening. As applause filled the air, Nathaniel looked over to the side where the 4 girls sat in the front row. Clean dresses, bright eyes, full smiles. The smallest of them waved at him, and he felt his heart catch. After the ceremony, as dusk turned to evening, fairy lights blinked on across the lawn. Someone started passing out slices of cake. Families lingered, unwilling to let the night end too soon.